Trump's relentless threats to annex Canada as the 51st state are backfiring spectacularly, and the numbers prove it. While Trump fantasizes about absorbing America's northern neighbor, Canadians are voting with their feet, turning away from the United States in record numbers and dealing a devastating blow to the American tourism industry. The data is staggering and tells a story of complete rejection. Canadian travel to the United States has plummeted by 25% year to date, with July marking the 7th consecutive month of declining visits. These aren't just statistics, they represent millions of Canadians who are saying no to Trump's America. To understand how we got here, we need to examine Trump's toxic rhetoric that has poisoned relations between these longtime allies. Throughout 2025, Trump has repeatedly made inflammatory statements about wanting to make Canada the 51st state. He's called Canadian leaders governors, threatened massive tariffs, and used economic coercion as a weapon against America's closest neighbor. The political landscape in Canada has shifted dramatically in response. Mark Carney's Liberal Party recently secured victory, with polling showing Carney leading by significant margins over his Conservative opponent. The campaign resonated with Canadians by standing firm against American aggression and economic threats.
You know, the fact of the matter is 43% for the Liberals, still pretty good. And the kicker is on the preferred prime minister number, right? Like Mark Carney being ahead by like 20 points. And I think that's the real story. For Pierre Poilievre, he has to start to build his personal brand to be more competitive with Mark Carney because Pierre Poilievre is trailing his own party.
How do issues factor into it? Because there's a lot of conversation right now happening. I know at caucus that they're gathered in Edmonton.
The impact of Trump's aggressive posturing is crystal clear in the numbers. In May alone, Canadian vehicle returns from the United States dropped by a massive 38% compared to the same month in 2024. Air travel wasn't spared either, falling by 24%. These aren't minor fluctuations. They represent a fundamental shift in how Canadians view their southern neighbor. What makes this even more damaging for Trump is that about 3/4 of Canadians now consider him dangerous. Favorable views of the United States among Canadians have hit an all-time low. Trump's bullying tactics and annexation threats have achieved the exact opposite of what he intended. Instead of bringing Canada closer, he's pushed them further away. Meanwhile, Trump's tariff strategy faces serious legal challenges. Lower courts have already declared his use of emergency powers for imposing tariffs unconstitutional, arguing that Congress, not the president, holds this authority. Despite these setbacks, multiple judges have already ruled against his approach.
Really simply, the founding document in the United States is our Constitution, and the Constitution specifically says that the power to tariff rests with Congress. So that is their power. Congress gave some of that power to the president under really specific laws. The one law that they didn't give the president that power is under his emergency powers. And so President Trump is the first president to ever use this emergency power in an attempt to implement tariffs, and he did it in a way that is contrary and at odds with all of the other statutes and laws that were passed by Congress to do tariffs. So it's pretty simple. It's an abuse of an emergency power in a way that Congress didn't intend, and therefore all of those actions are unconstitutional.
The Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments on these global tariffs, adding to the unprecedented number of emergency cases his administration has brought to the highest court.
Well, this is, again, the president going through these emergency proceedings, and the court took this case up really, really fast. And we have to recognize that Donald Trump is on a massive win streak with these emergency docket cases going before the Supreme Court. In fact, he's won 17 of 23, and we know one is still pending. And a ruling just came down recently. So if this case is any indication of what we can expect in terms of success or failure, the president has a very good chance of actually getting a verdict in his favor in this case. And to be clear, if you compare what Donald Trump has done going through emergency dockets to get the case to take these cases up quickly versus, say, what the last administration did, Donald Trump has brought more emergency docket cases than the Biden administration did in the entire 4 years. Donald Trump has brought more in the first 7 months in office than the Biden administration did.
the economic consequences for the United States are severe and mounting. Tourism economics had predicted a 20% drop in Canadian travelers, but the reality has been even worse. The U.S. Travel Association warned that even a 10% decrease would translate to 2 million fewer visits and $2.1 billion lost spending. With actual declines reaching 25%, the economic damage is catastrophic. Canadians aren't just staying home, they're actively boycotting American products and choosing alternative destinations. Border cities that once thrived on Canadian visitors are now struggling to survive. Buffalo, New York, tried desperately to entice Canadians back with welcoming billboards and special incentives over the summer, but their efforts failed miserably. The customary wave of Canadian visitors simply never arrived. Polling reveals that Trump and U.S. relations have become Canadians' top national concern, surpassing even domestic issues. All of the top 4 concerns in recent surveys relate directly or indirectly to pocketbook issues: trade disruptions, job security, inflation, and housing costs. Canadians are experiencing unprecedented anxiety about their financial security and economic future.
Tracking on the top national issue of concern, focus on Trump and U.S. relations is still the top issue. But the interesting thing, Vashi, is when you look at the top 4, they're all directly or indirectly pocketbook issues. So top Trump and trade, jobs in the economy. Then you have kind of inflation, the cost of housing. So think of Canadians worried about paying for the bills. Think of Canadians worried about their jobs, wondering what will happen in the next 6 months, wondering what will happen with the trade relationship. So there's a certain level or a high level of anxiety that's underpinning a lot of those views right now. And, you know, for the Liberals, they've really got to start to deliver, because how long will Canadians wait to transition from the Liberals talking about things to delivering on some of the promises that they have?
The human cost of Trump's failed strategy is evident in communities across America. One New York golf club reported losing $400,000 in Canadian revenue alone. Cities like Seattle are no longer seeing Canadians flooding their streets. Instead, those tourism dollars are staying in Canada or going to other countries that actually welcome Canadian visitors. Trump's toxic approach has created a vicious cycle of rejection and retaliation. New border measures, including selected detainment and requiring Canadians to register with Homeland Security for stays over 30 days, have made many Canadians feel unwelcome. Some are even describing the United States as a hostile state, a remarkable transformation for what was once considered America's friendliest neighbor. The irony is that while Trump claims he wants to unite North America under American control, his actions are driving the continent apart. Canadian officials have moved from treating Trump's annexation comments as jokes to viewing them as legitimate threats. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was caught on a hot mic, acknowledging that Trump's threats might be a real thing, driven by America's desire for Canada's critical mineral resources. A dramatic shift in Canadian attitudes toward international trade has emerged. Support for increased trade with China has surged from just 10% in 2020 to 36% today. This change isn't about China becoming more appealing, it's a direct reaction to American uncertainties. Canadians are actively seeking alternatives to American economic dominance.
Oh, it's significantly. You know, back in 2020, there was a benchmark where we asked Canadians about whether they thought trade with China should increase, decrease, or stay the same. Back in 2020, when we asked this question, 10%. 1 out of every 10 Canadians thought that trade with China should increase. That now has jumped to 36% of Canadians who believe that trade with China should increase. And I don't think this is a result of anything that China has done. This is more about a reaction to the United States, where we know in our other polling that Canadians want to see almost like a portfolio approach. They want to see us doing more trade with Europe. They want to see us doing more trade with Asia, with China. A lot of that in response to making sure that we're resilient, still trading a lot with the United States, but looking at almost like a multilateral strategy on that.
Meanwhile, Canada is thriving without American tourists. The country is seeing an increasing number of European visitors, with visits from the United Kingdom rising by 14% and Mexico by 22% in recent months. Canadians themselves are choosing domestic destinations, supporting their own tourism economy instead of subsidizing Trump's America. The broader pattern reveals Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of diplomacy and economics. You cannot bully your way to prosperity, and you cannot threaten your neighbors into submission. Trump's approach has not only failed to bring Canada closer, but has actively damaged American economic interests. This isn't just about tourism, it's about the complete breakdown of a relationship that took decades to build. The United States and Canada share the world's longest undefended border, built on trust and mutual respect. Trump has systematically destroyed that trust with his reckless rhetoric and hostile policies. The damage extends beyond just Canadian visitors. The United States recorded a 17% decline in European arrivals this past spring, also likely due to Trump's policies and general actions. America is becoming increasingly isolated as Trump's aggressive approach alienates ally after ally. For American businesses that depend on international tourism, Trump's failures are creating a crisis. The U.S. Travel Association estimates that Canadian travelers generated $20.5 billion in spending and supported 140,000 American jobs in previous years. Those jobs are now at risk because of Trump's toxic approach to international relations. The most damaging aspect of this debacle is that it was entirely preventable. Canada has been America's most reliable ally and trading partner. Canadians have historically had positive views of the United States and were frequent visitors who contributed billions to the American economy. Trump has squandered this goodwill through his reckless pursuit of an impossible annexation fantasy. What's particularly galling is that Trump continues to double down on his failed strategy. Even as the economic damage mounts and the political backlash intensifies, he persists with his annexation rhetoric and hostile policies. He seems incapable of recognizing that his approach is backfiring spectacularly. The Canadian response has been swift and decisive. Mark Carney's Liberal Party won the recent Canadian election largely by standing up to Trump's aggression. Their elbows up campaign slogan, a hockey term for defensive stance, resonated with Canadians who were fed up with Trump's bullying. The election results sent a clear message: Canada will not be intimidated. Looking ahead, the prospects for recovery appear dim as long as Trump maintains his current approach. Canadian travelers have found alternative destinations and are enjoying their domestic tourism boom. They've discovered they don't need America for great vacation experiences, and many seem reluctant to return even if conditions improve. The broader implications for American foreign policy are troubling. If Trump cannot maintain positive relations with Canada, America's closest ally and most important trading partner, what hope is there for relationships with other nations? The Canadian tourism collapse is just one symptom of a larger failure in American leadership. This crisis also highlights the fundamental weakness in Trump's understanding of economics. He seems to believe that threats and coercion can force other countries to comply with American demands. The Canadian response proves the opposite, that hostile rhetoric and aggressive policies drive partners away and damage American interests. The irony is that Trump's annexation fantasy was always impossible. Adding Canada as the 51st state would require congressional approval and a Canadian referendum. With overwhelming Canadian opposition to the idea, it was never going to happen. But Trump's pursuit of this impossible goal has created very real economic damage for American businesses and communities. As we look at the mounting evidence of Trump's failure, one thing becomes clear. His toxic approach to Canada has been a disaster for American economic interests. The tourism collapse, the job losses, and the damaged relationships are all direct consequences of his reckless policies and inflammatory rhetoric. The Canadian tourism exodus represents more than just lost revenue. It's a rejection of Trump's vision of America. Canadians are choosing to spend their money elsewhere, supporting economies that actually welcome them rather than threaten them with annexation. This is what happens when bullying replaces diplomacy and threats replace partnership. Trump's annexation threats haven't brought Canada closer to joining the United States. They've pushed America's closest ally further away than ever before. The empty hotels, struggling border cities, and massive job losses are the price America is paying for Trump's toxic leadership. And as long as he continues down this path, the damage will only get worse.